2024 Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley came up with an idea when it comes to social media that some are absolutely crushing her for. But in reality, there are many people on the left who have already proposed such an idea. Some on the right have as well. People like social psychologist Jonathan Haidt have talked about this. So I want to discuss it in some depth. Nikki Haley's idea here is that everyone on social media must provide proof of identification. Take a listen to what she had to say. This is from Fox News over the weekend.
When I get into office, the first thing we have to do, social media accounts, social media companies, they have to show America their algorithms. Let us see why they're pushing what they're pushing. The second thing is every person on social media should be verified by their name. That's, first of all, it's a national security threat. When you do that, all of a sudden people have to stand by what they say, and it gets rid of the Russian bots, the Iranian bots, and the Chinese bots. And then you're going to get some civility when people know their name is next to what they say.
Accountability.
And they know their pastor and their family member is going to see it. It's going to help our kids, and it's going to help our country.
Now, Nikki Haley is correctly identifying an absolute and total reality about social media. Many people would never say on social media the things that they say. The messages I get, I believe, 90, 95, 98% of the truly sick and disgusting messages that I get, I don't believe I would get if people knew that it was known who they were. Now, there are some really important differences between how such a plan could be put in place. And this is where I think a bunch of the controversy is. What Jonathan Haidt has proposed is that individuals can't be anonymous to the platform. You're allowed to use a pseudonym. And some of the right wingers that flipped out about this, and left wingers, said, what if you're a victim of some crime and you're posting about it? Or what if you are an intelligence person who just wants to privately have an account? Why should you need to post under your real name? There's two versions of this. One version of this is you have to post under your real name. Another is to have an account, you have to verify your identity to the platform, but you can still use a pseudonym. So in other words, if I wanted to post under, I don't know, Tom Brady 7859246, I could do that. But when I register, I have to prove my real identity to the platform. And then if I do something illegal or whatever, the platform would know who I am. Now, there's a difference between those two things. And there's also a difference between government requiring platforms to do this sort of verification versus platforms deciding for themselves that it's something they want to do. So there's two options there, two options on pseudonyms. This gives us like a 2x2 grid, as it were, of how something like this could be implemented. Now, let's go through some of the reasons why this could be concerning. It is absolutely true that well-funded intelligence agencies could have the resources to fabricate identities. So you think you're getting rid of the Russian bots or the Chinese trolls or whatever, because you say, hey, you got to prove to us that you're a real person in order to post. But some of these really well-funded governments can fabricate identities. They can fabricate IDs. They can have a robust way to fake that these are real people. At the same time, it's sort of like with gun safety regulations. No one rule will fix the entire problem. But if you have a robust verification system, you could do away with a bunch of this problem, but no system would be foolproof for sure. The other concern would be, if you have a really robust identity verification system, dissidents are going to be placed in difficult and potentially dangerous situations when it comes to speaking out against an oppressive government. People who, for example, spoke out in Egypt during the Arab Spring, if you required identity verification, they might be scared to speak out, or in fact, they could be putting themselves at risk for speaking out. And so that's absolutely a concern. And it needs to be weighed in thinking about this. Now, there are some who say that this would be a free speech limitation, that you are quite literally violating people's free speech rights. First of all, if Twitter or Facebook did this, they aren't the government, so they would not be violating anyone's First Amendment rights, certainly. Companies can have whatever registration requirements they want. That doesn't violate free speech. The answer here to me is, I'm not sure that social media companies should be forced to do this kind of verification. And I don't think that you should be forced to post under your real name. but it doesn't sound like a bad thing for companies to say, hey, we need to know who you are based on our terms of service. And Haidt believes social media companies should be asking not only for some kind of identity verification, but also should be doing this in order to make sure that people under a certain age aren't on the platform, because that's really easy to do. You can still post anonymously or pseudonymously, but Twitter should know who you are and make sure that you are of a certain age. Many people on both sides of the political spectrum like that idea. Many people on both sides of the political spectrum don't like that idea. Personally, we have had situations where people threaten me in a credible way on these platforms. Not the, you're a loser, I hope I don't run into you on the street. Not talking about that. But we have had real threats on the platform where in some cases it took months for law enforcement to identify the people. In a couple cases, they eventually did, showed up at their houses, and federal cases were launched against them. But it took an insane amount of work to find people who were just issuing really horrible threats, people who in some cases seemed to have both the, let's call them the tools to carry out what they were threatening, and the motivation. And why as a society are we making it easier to deal with that? It seems like a problem. Pseudonyms, all for it. Anonymous posting, sure. But there are lots of good arguments for saying the platforms should know who is on those platforms. Let me know your thoughts. So I wrote another book for kids. The first book was Think Like a Detective. The point of the first book was to teach kids critical thinking, which Republicans don't want them to learn, because when kids learn critical thinking, they don't vote for Republicans. The new book is Think Like a Scientist. This is a fun adventure teaching kids the scientific method. Again, Republicans aren't big on kids learning the scientific method, because when they do, they're less likely to fall for Republican lies about climate change and vaccines and so many other things. You can get the new book as well as the first one at davidpakman.com/book. This is part of the Adventures in Thinking series. Can you imagine that we're doing this? We are. davidpakman.com/book. 13,500 copies of the first book have sold. I'll bring you an update soon on sales for the second book. Think Like a Scientist, davidpakman.com/book.